Well, the prosecution has had weeks to lay out their case against Diddy, to present evidence that he's a sex trafficker. And honestly, I'm not all that impressed. While there's been testimony with salacious details of his swinging lifestyle and drug-fueled sex parties and clearly controlling, physically abusive behavior, the real question is whether they presented any evidence that he's been engaged in sex trafficking. So, join me as we break down the prosecution's case and do a legal deep dive into the testimony in the Diddy trial. What's good, people? If you've been following the Diddy trial, then you certainly got an earful, to put it mildly. A lot of crazy details about this man's lifestyle, but hey, who am I to judge? I want to start by changing the position I took early on when I suggested the defense strategy use evidence of his contribution to the community and his generosity to make him seem more likable to the jury, so they would see a more benevolent side of the man. Well, I take it back. At this point, there's already been so much testimony and evidence about his physically abusive behavior and his mafia-like control issues that trying to get the jury to like this man is like trying to get sympathy for the devil. They actually have a better chance of getting Rolling Stone to come to the courthouse and play that song on the courthouse steps. Now, before we start our analysis, I do want to remind everyone of the framework in which I said we should examine this case. And really, it should be in the context for the crime for which he is accused, namely sex trafficking, and the elements of that offense, as opposed to evidence of his drug-fueled sex parties and physically abusive nature. Those are two separate things. In the legal context, a lot of that testimony about his violence, domestic abuse, and his sexual swinging lifestyle, that's more character evidence. Although, of course, the prosecution is going to try to tie that to the sex trafficking allegations. And I want to be clear. The evidence is overwhelming that Diddy was physically abusive to women who worked for him or women he had a relationship with. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, if he was on trial for domestic violence, he'd be convicted 100 times over, stop the trial right now, throw himself on the mercy of the court. But that's not what he's on trial for. He's on trial for sex trafficking. And without getting to a long, detailed explanation of what sex trafficking is, basically what that means is he's forcing women to engage in sexual activity as a result of force or illegal coercion or threats. That's sex trafficking. But when you break down the testimony of these witnesses, I truly believe that's where the prosecution case breaks down. Now let's start with the testimony of his girlfriend, Cassie. I've always said from the beginning, I thought it was a mistake for the prosecution to start with that witness. I really think if you're going to make a case for sex trafficking, you want the face of your case to be someone with no money, no power, no family, no support, no real way out, where they had no choice or no options. I mean, that's the basis of sex trafficking. But Cassie was none of those things. She was in a relationship with Diddy for about a decade. She came and went as she pleased. She cheated on him with other boyfriends and snuck around behind his back. She told him how she wanted to marry him and have a better relationship with him. She even admitted to planning some of the hotel freak-offs. And ultimately, it was Cassie who ended the relationship with Diddy, not the other way around. That doesn't sound like a victim. That sounds like someone who had a choice. And even after she ended the relationship with him, according to her own testimony, she met him in a hotel to have sex with him one last time. Now, she did testify that on multiple occasions he threatened to release some of the sex tapes that she was involved in. But I've got to ask you, does anyone really believe she stayed with that man for over a decade and put up with physical abuse and participated in drug-fueled hotel sex parties and flied on private jets all over the country because he threatened to release some sex tapes she made? I don't think so. I just think that dog just doesn't hunt. And to me, this is what I think is a real kick in the head with her testimony. Now, you all may remember that she filed a lawsuit with Diddy that shortly thereafter got settled for $20 million. Well, according to her testimony, after she broke up with Diddy, She threatened to release a tell-all book involving their life together unless he paid her $30 million. And when he wouldn't pay her $30 million and told her to go jump in the lake, that's when she filed the lawsuit and got the $20 million. I'm gonna call it like I see it. I think it was a big mistake for the prosecution to make Cassie the face of their case. There is minimal, if any, evidence that Cassie engaged in that conduct, that sexual conduct against her will as a result of threats, force, violence, or blackmail. But she clearly wanted a life with him. She wanted a normal relationship. She wanted more. She consented to a swinging lifestyle, and she received financial benefit from that relationship. Yes, Diddy was physically abusive. Yes, he was emotionally abusive. However, Cassie always had a choice. She chose to stay there. She made a meaningful choice. She deliberated with different options as to whether or not she should leave the relationship or stay. She tried to stay for a long time and make it work until she decided it wasn't working for her, and she left. And once she left, there were no issues. There's no testimony of threats, of violence. There's no testimony of him saying he's gonna kill her or she'll never get away from him. Nothing like that. She decided to leave the relationship. They hooked up one last time, and then she extorted him out of $20 million. So, you might agree with me, or you don't like what I'm saying. I really don't give a damn. Either way, do me a favor, post your comments and call it like you see it. Also, stay tuned for part 2, where I do a deep dive into the testimony of the next 2 prosecution witnesses. That's it. Well, that's all I got, but I do appreciate you taking the time to join me on this legal deep dive. I think it's always fun to discuss these topics, tell you what I think, and get your feedback. I would really appreciate it if you took the time to like the video, subscribe to the podcast, and also I'd appreciate you sending me your comments so we can discuss the topics you want to hear about. That's it.